Hey everybody, Michael from FUTO here. Today we're interviewing Samir, one of our FUTO fellows who has been leading the work on improving the swipe typing on the FUTO keyboard. So if you don't already know, we're soliciting swipes from the community in order to build an open swipe dataset. And you can participate anonymously at swipe.futo.org if you would like. The link is going to be in the description. We also have an entire video on this here. If you want to learn more about this, the links will all be in the description. We've gotten a great response so far from the community. Would you mind telling us what we're currently sitting at for unique words swiped and like total words swiped overall for the project so far, Samir?
Yeah, so we're around somewhere like 30,000 unique words and write 500,000 swipes. It's quite a large number.
Yeah, and so then what is like the overarching goal that we're aiming for, just so people know?
So it's twofold. The first one is we want to release an open swipe dataset, something that's separate from Google or any other big company, for researchers to use and for people to improve their own swipe systems on. And we're also obviously improving our own FUTO keyboard with a neural network based system. So all the data is going towards that as well.
Cool. So participants in the project have asked many questions. And so rather than respond to all of these questions that people are asking individually, we were just hoping that you could answer some videos in the video format so that we can go over some of the most asked questions and dive into some of these all in one place for people to see.
Sure, yeah.
So I was hoping that we could start off with just like, most people I feel like don't know you in our little community other than people that work here. So I was hoping you could start off with like a little bit of background information about yourself and how you got involved in the keyboard project.
Yeah, so I work, I'm a student researcher at UC Riverside, but a lot of my work is open source already. I mostly work in the virtual reality space, mainly with interface systems, things like eye tracking and face tracking. Things that deal with very sensitive information, but also provide a unique sort of interface into the digital realm. I got interested with FUTO, because one of the people I worked with, Alex, is also working with me on a lot of my other open source projects. So we just kind of talked together, and he was discussing his problem about swiping on the keyboard, and I was like, that sounds very interesting. I can help you out on that. So we sort of got together, and we're here now working on it.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So, yeah, you said there's some problems with the swipe as it currently exists. So, externally, most of our users that are fans of the keyboard understand already that the swipe is not the best as it exists right now. So, how does our current swipe work at present? Like, I was hoping you could go into like why it's the case that the swipe isn't working too well and go over some of the issues that you've mentioned about acquiring swipe data for training on.
Yeah. So there's a few main issues. The first one is that our swipe algorithm as of current, when you're swiping, it cannot determine which words or which letters you mean to swipe over and which letters you don't mean to swipe over. Right. So when we're swiping on the keyboard, we simply just take the path that your finger is on and go over all the letters that your finger is going on, and then use that to try to match it to a dictionary that pulls the most relevant looking word compared to what you've swiped. The issue with that is, number one, is that sometimes you fat finger a word and you mess up, and so the swipe algorithm has a really hard time determining when that happens. So we end up facing issues where the algorithm predicts a wrong word. The other issue is that it can't take context of what you've typed before already. So I can't take my previous parts of my sentence and put it in with the rest of it when I do a swipe. And we hope that with this neural network-based system that we'll be able to use context from what you previously typed to help improve the swipe prediction when you swipe next.
And so part of this that you've and other people on the team have mentioned is, so like there are other swipe data sets out there that are often used by HCI, human computer interface researchers. So what is like the typical data set size, and like why haven't these data sets for swipes been particularly helpful in like fixing these issues?
So most of the data sets are pretty small comparatively. It's around maybe 20,000-ish swipes to 50,000-ish swipes. It's not a lot of swipe data, and there's even fewer unique words. In the data set that went in one of the only data sets that's public, which is the How We Swipe data set, it's only around 2,000 unique words. So the actual amount of unique words is very tiny. And the issue is that with HCI research, people tend to, especially big companies, they're sort of, trying to make like they're so focused on privacy that they basically don't let the rest of the world know what they're doing, and in the end they violate their own privacy sort of tendencies anyway. So making an open data set was really important because we just didn't have enough data publicly, and people weren't releasing it because they were sort of shrouded by this sort of fake privacy issue that all these companies have cooked up essentially, in terms of what they're releasing.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess it is fair to say if their data sets just like completely track these users and completely don't do much to preserve their privacy whatsoever internally. They're just like taking raw user data essentially and not really anonymizing it or doing much of anything with it. So like I think most people watching this probably understand that like yes, they can't release these openly because it would probably damage their image in a certain sense to see like, oh, that's the sentence I swiped yesterday, like when it's very raw form. And a lot of, is this like the case you believe in a lot of these companies?
Well, yeah. So it's interesting. So the first biggest issue, and it's very interesting. So the first biggest issue is that we don't know what they do to sensitize this data or try to desensitize it. Sorry, if they try to abstract the data away from the user, we don't know exactly what process they're using because they don't release what they're using. Right. So they don't release what they're using. So we don't know how they're doing it. So we don't know whether they're preserving privacy or not. And because they may or may not be preserving privacy, they can't release it in the first place. So it's this sort of loop where, you want to use that data, but at the same time, you don't know what their processes are because they haven't released it because they probably aren't privatizing that user data as well as they should be. Because filtering that out is not only difficult, but then collecting it on mass scale is just sort of impractical when it comes to trying to filter out that more sensitive data because it gets lost and it's really hard to build out, like robust algorithms to filter that stuff out. And they don't want to put in the work to do it because, why not just give it all the data and then you're good. Right. So
Well, I guess you're probably more aware of this than I am, but like there's several of these companies that try and put out papers on differential privacy and stuff like this in these data collection things, but it seems kind of like the way they're using differential privacy is often kind of iffy, and they also don't like allow a public facing audit of their proprietary implementations of these things. Like they'll publish like kind of like a white paper, but they won't show you the code or the results.
and the other thing is that differential privacy like methods don't like if you took a differential privacy system versus a traditional system where they're gathering that data directly off of their keyboards, the one that directly gathers the data off the keyboards is going to perform better in production than a differential privacy system. So they just are like, it's better performance if you just take the user data directly rather than using a differential privacy system in the first place. So let's just take the user data directly rather than using differential privacy.
Yeah, yeah. Like the accuracy goes down if you privatize the data, so they would rather just like not privatize the data and just not have it be public so that no one can see all the spied on data sets.
Yeah.
So getting back to the things we're doing differently. So can you run us through like a bit of how this will work after all the new changes? Like, are there going to be, you mentioned a little bit of this, but are there going to be any like overarching changes in the architecture that will be different, or is it just going to be augmented with better data, or like what is
So
the thing that's going to happen?
So the first thing that happens is that we train new models on this new data set that we have. Before, like I said, we're using traditional algorithms that aren't very robust. So the idea is to take this new data and train a neural network, which is a lot more powerful and a lot more able to adapt to weird changes that the user is doing, and use that in our new, implementation of the keyboard swipe system that'll be, rolling out once we're done with data collection. The other thing is obviously we want to release this data set, right? So the second overarching goal is to release the data set, maybe release a short blurb about maybe a technical paper about how it works and what some of the statistics that are in the data set. And both of these together will not only make our product better, but give back to the community that gave us the data in the first place. So yeah, that's kind of like their overarching goal.
Yeah, for sure. The main question that we've gotten over and over again in like comments and threads about this topic is support for swipe in other languages. So I'm aware already that you have a solution that you will be able to apply to the data set that we're collecting, and you will be able to like extend this in some way to other language swipes, but it's a little bit complicated. So could you explain in kind of like a layman way, like how this will work?
So essentially, the idea is that you have to map the model's output. So it's twofold. The first thing is that we can use the existing model that we have, right? And then what we do is we take a small amount of data from that language. So I don't know, let's say Hindi, for example. We take a small amount of data from some people who know Hindi, and they swipe out maybe a few thousand words, and we use that and we give it to the model so that it can adapt its own inputs and outputs to now work with Hindi as well. The other way to do it is that we map. So we take the 26 key QWERTY keyboard and we try to map it over to another language the best we can, because you see the model outputs it as a distance from the most likely key, right? So when you're swiping, it's predicting, oh, you're swiping over A, you're swiping over B, you're swiping over C. So we need to change that formula so that rather than it explicitly telling us what key you're swiping over, we make it tell us what place on the keyboard you're at so that we can take the most closest letter again. And then maybe you can also give us a thing that says, how likely is that key that you're swiping over, the letter that you mean to type? Because the issue is right now, obviously, the entire data set is English. So when you try to adapt it to other languages, there's going to be a little bit of especially in the early days when we first release other languages, if we can, there's going to be a little bit of friction there. It's going to be a little bit funky, but over time, when we start figuring out how to make the models work better with this, we'll have something that's more robust. But yeah, for what we're going to do now is, for now, we're going to see if we can best map our QWERTY keyboard outputs to another language. And if not, we're probably going to switch the method maybe to something else that works like how we did before with a dictionary type system, where but rather than a blind matching of what the gibberish that you swiped over to a dictionary, the model more intelligently decides what letters you actually meant to swipe over, and then we match it to a dictionary. And that way, you can extend the dictionary with whatever language you want, and the model will still work with it.
So this is not exactly generating. Well, it's kind of generating synthetic data, but also kind of not. It sounds like.
Yeah, it's more loose. So the way it's normally done is that you train a model per language. Like I train a model for Hindi, I train a language for Italian, I train a language model for French, and you train these models separately. But the issue is it's not very efficient, and you need to collect a lot of data to do that. We have more than enough English data, so the idea now is, can we make these English models sort of more gooey? Like, can they be adapted to other languages by teaching the model that rather than mapping to the exact, like, oh yeah, like this swipe is to letter A, we say that this swipe is to this position on the keyboard, and this position on the keyboard is most likely being pressed by the user when they swipe over that letter. It's very complicated. And I hope to work on it more. I'm going to be honest. It's a little bit of a interesting solution, and I'm not sure how well it's going to work, but we'll definitely try to get there and do our best to get there.
So the idea behind all these things is, like, to be clear, you're saying that you can, in theory, do all this without needing people to replicate what we just did for English with another language. Like a small subset of another language might be all that you need to get us compatible by, like, kind of doing this process over the English data set.
Right. So yeah, hopefully somehow adapting our existing English data set. It's going to be a rough ride, but I'm sure we can get it done.
Yeah, it makes sense. So, okay, let's see what else. So people have asked quite a bit about the dashes between certain compound words, and lots of people have said that they're skipping them. And you and the other project maintainer, Alex, have said that you do not want people to skip them. Can you explain, like, what's happening here? A lot of the users are confused about the words that have the dashes in them.
So the thing is that when you skip a word, we like ditch it from the entire data set. You see, those compound words are very like complex and interesting words. We like complex and interesting words. They make the model better. In fact, the ones that are harder to swipe are the ones that we want in the model because then it learns how you want to swipe those words. When you go to swipe them, some super califragilisticexpialidocious word type thing, really long, really complex. When you swipe that in our production model, if you haven't done it in our data collection set here, then it's not going to know how to properly do it. So you want to swipe those hard words, those things with dashes, those things with, really long, really, compound words that we want is because, it makes the model better at the end of the day. It's an interesting, different word. It's not like an and or an a or a the. That's very common. It's something very interesting. So it doesn't just apply to dashes. It applies to every, harder to swipe word. Things, like complicated words that are very long are things that we want.
No, I think it's because the dash looks kind of like an error to people because they can't swipe the dash character, so
Yeah,
they just
so
don't.
so so don't worry about that. If you can't swipe it, just pretend it isn't there and continue swiping the rest of that word. The at the end of the day, what we'll do is we have multiple stages about how we process the data and how we get it to be ready for the model to look at in the first place. Um, and so those dashes are irrelevant, but will be fixed in the final model. We will have it in there.
Also, a lot of people are also getting confused about um, the weird English words that are in this, where they seem to think that like what you're building up is a one-to-one database where it's like, okay, these are the words that you can swipe. And so you already said this, but just to be like clear for people that maybe didn't understand, like this isn't saying that like if supercalifragilistic whatever is not in our swipe data set, you won't be able to swipe it. It's not designed like that.
So yeah, so how it works currently is it's character level. It's not sentence level or not word level. So when the model predicts your swipe, it predicts at the character level. So like you swiped over S, you swiped over A, you swiped over B, you swiped over C. It's character level. So yes, if you didn't swipe over supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, the entire word, has never been seen by the model, but it should be able to roughly predict the character level. So because we train on character level, train on A's, then B's, then C's, because we train on the character level for the entire word, we break it down into characters, we're able to predict other words that have not been swiped over. Building an entire one-to-one data set is extremely difficult. The English language has many, many words. So having it at the character level, teaching you how when you swipe over A, how it looks like, when you swipe over B, how it looks like, in conjunction with how it looks, when you swipe entire sentences or entire words, is what makes these models really powerful. It's necessary for things that are really long because the model has not seen a swipe that's long, that long. Because when you're swiping short words like and the, they're quick swipes, and the model's like, oh yeah, I've seen a lot of quick swipes, but these longer swipes that are like super long words I've never seen before. So when it tries to go and predict even at the character level, it will mess up. So we want people to make those complicated words when they swipe so that the model gets used to seeing how, those really long swipes over those really big words, and properly predicting their individual characters in that word. So that's kind of the idea.
Yeah, see, a lot of people seem to think that it's just like a one-to-one database that we're writing or that we're like, collecting here, and
There's
that's
no
just
set
going to be.
dictionary here. All the
Yeah,
entire
yeah, yeah.
There's no set
I
dictionary. That's how our old system worked. Our old system had a set dictionary, which is why you couldn't swipe supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, but you could with this. So that's kind of like one of the big differences.
Yeah, it's a lot of people seem to think that our thing is going to be constructed that way, and so I just wanted to clear that up extra carefully for everyone watching. Okay, so let's get into what would be some of like the goals for the data set. So obviously more is always better, but what are like some of the thresholds that we're trying to meet in terms of like unique word swipe? Why are these like good thresholds to have? Like what are other data sets?
So the first one is we've far surpassed any existing research data set by like miles already. And when we release this, will be the biggest research data set for this type of data ever, right? Which is awesome. But one of the big goals that we have is 80,000 swipes, like over the entire data set, and that means that we'll have maybe around 50,000 unique words, and that is the most vocabularies for language mod. It's a strange way to compare, but most vocabularies for Language models are also around 50,000-ish unique words or unique tokens, which is a different thing. But we want to reach
Did you
that
mean
level.
80,000 words or swipes?
So 50,000 unique words that have been swiped, right? And 800,000 swipes total.
Okay,
Uh,
you said 880, I think,
oh,
before. That's
oh,
why I asked, just to make sure.
about that. But yeah, so we want 800,000 unique, not unique swipes, regular swipes with 50,000 unique words in those swipes. Um, and that's kind of our research goal because it's bigger than any research data set. It's roughly to what we've seen in other literature as well. Grammarly, Google, Meta, a bunch of others who published these very brief papers on how they did their swipe stuff have given out these numbers as well as like we have this many unique words, we have this many unique words, and so we're like, okay, we can ballpark get around that many unique words as well with our actual data. So we're kind of going off of what we find in research as well. Big inspiration for us is what is out there. It's limited, but we are going off of it to see if we can best replicate that as much as possible, and then obviously release a much more open system that is exactly how it is done rather than like brief blurbs about how it's done that were given from other companies.
So this data set is going to be part of this like larger research project, and you're a undergraduate researcher at the moment. So can you speak a little bit about like the publication? Like people have been asking like what kind of research is going to come out of this, and so like I know that you probably want to keep what you're publishing a little bit under wraps, but like, is there anything you can speak about in general? Like, what are you thinking about writing? What kind of conferences are you thinking about submitting to? No, I don't know.
but in terms of what the idea is to write, it's a lot of demographics. So the first easiest and sort of one that I'm thinking about doing is something about the demographics of the data set. How many swipes, how many unique words, what kind of unique words, what's their average length, of those words, what's the median length of those words, how does it compare to other existing open data sets, and why is ours better in terms of how much data is collected and the variability of the data? How did we conduct the experiment, right? How did we get the app running? How did we select what sentences we're going to have people swipe? How did we do other really important things that I can't say here, but we'll say in the research paper? So those sorts of things are critical for a research paper. And the main thing is that we want to do what big companies didn't do, is we want to describe this process. We want to write it down, have it very, very precise about what was done here. Because these other big companies, they don't do that. When they release these research papers, they're very small blurbs about how it was done. The ones that are more extensive are really old, so we have no idea what they're using now. And so we want to make a very, very like concise and accurate representation of what happened here.
So in your opinion, you would say that like the work being put out by these large companies is more of like, I guess you could say it's like a PR statement in publication form without any of the replication steps needed to like get usable information out of it. Is that fair to say?
There's a lot of things that they are missing. The first step when I joined the Swipe team was to look at all these research papers. Let's see what's already been done. First off, there's very few papers, is what I figured out quickly. The second thing is that these papers, they're not very in depth. They're like, oh, we used 20,000 unique words. We're not going to tell you exactly anything of what we did with data processing. We're not going to tell you the model architecture properly. We're going to tell you all these small little blurbs. Oh, we used this general type of model. We use this general type of architecture. We use this general amount of words. But we're not going to tell you any of the in between steps that are like everything else that's needed. Like it's very strange. It's very strange. They should not have done that. They should have just come out and say, this is how it's done. This is how you replicate the work properly. Because that's what research is all about. It's about replicating the work. It's about making sure that, others can build on your research. This is not research that you can build on because it's incomplete, So yeah, that's one of the bigger things I have hope for this, new sort of swipe data set.
Tons of people have been asking those questions specifically. There's other questions, but I'll probably let you go, I think. So thank you for having us on here. Yeah, check out the keyboard. It's keyboard.futo.org. Check out the swipe site also, swipe.futo.org. See ya.